In 2015, when we started this project with less than 24 of participants, many said that this is the ceiling, that this is the level of your success. This is what you can hope for, and this is what you can wish that you're going to maintain in the coming years. Today, we are more than 800 participants from 42 states, and nearly 150 congressional districts are represented in this Palestine Advocacy Day.
With these opening remarks on Monday, September 19th, Executive Director Dr. Osama Abu Rashid commenced AJP Action's 8th Annual Palestine Advocacy Days with a new record of over 800 advocates from all over the country fighting for Palestine on Capitol Hill. The program launched with an intensive training session led by former congressional staffers and experts in advocacy and civic engagement. The second day followed with a packed schedule, including public plenary sessions with members of Congress, community leaders, experts, and activists. Kicked off with the Champion of Palestinian Rights Award, which was awarded this year to Congresswoman Marie Newman for her courageous advocacy for Palestinian liberation and self-determination.
While it is lovely to receive this, and I can't tell you how honored I am, we shouldn't have to praise people for doing the right thing.
Other members of Congress talked about their work for Palestinian rights. Palestinian-American Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib acknowledged the injustice Palestinians experience under Israeli apartheid and the challenges facing American policy, but echoed a point of optimism by saying,
"But as a member of the United States Congress, I see the tide is turning in our favor every single day. Public opinion is already continuing to shift in our favor, with Americans growing increasingly more critical of the apartheid government of Israel. They are questioning how we can claim to stand for liberty and justice while bankrolling Israel's military war crimes and human rights abuses to the tune of several $billion each year. Among progressives, it has become clear that you cannot claim to hold progressive values, yet back Israel's apartheid government."
These statements triggered a great deal of backlash and smears by apartheid apologists, targeting the Palestinian-American Congresswoman.
Rashida Tlaib of Michigan facing criticism today from what several of her Jewish colleagues have deemed anti-Semitic comments.
Congressman Andre Carson also expressed support for the Palestinian struggle for justice.
"I stand with the Palestinian people against military occupation, blockades, legal settlements, and racial discrimination."
He also demanded an investigation and meaningful accountability for Israel's killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, highlighting his leadership on the Justice for Shireen Act. Congresswoman Judy Chu spoke of her personal experience witnessing the injustice in Palestinian villages and advocated for real human rights constraints on U.S. military funding for Israel.
But it is not enough to stop the expansion of settlements. We need to end the occupation entirely and give the Palestinian people a chance at a better future.
In her remarks, Congresswoman Betty McCollum advocated for all Palestinians to be afforded the human rights they deserve and spoke of the lack of accountability for Israel. Shireen's shocking murder at the hands of the IDF is yet another life cut short in a long line of abuses committed by the Israeli army. As we know, we cannot rely on the Israeli government to conduct a fair, transparent investigation, and as an American citizen, she is entitled to the full protections afforded to U.S. citizens living abroad. The drastic decline in support for apartheid Israel and the shifting role of the Israel lobby in U.S. politics was the topic of a session that featured activists, leaders, and organizers who discussed their perspectives on ending U.S. complicity in Israeli crimes.
This attempt to intimidate activists or defenders of Palestinian human rights is all intended to intimidate us into silence.
The hope and the question is is this going to help make people look at the underlying philosophy that safety for Jews means unconditional support for Israel, and that securing Jewish safety means literally destroying any semblance of Palestinian safety.
And we see it with the fact that we have now 4 sitting members of Congress who have used the A word. 4 members of Congress have actually used the word apartheid, and all of them have won their re-elections. So that's a sign of a major shift in public discourse. It's a sign of a shift in Washington. It's a sign of a momentum going in the right direction.
Holding Israel accountable for its murder of Palestinian Americans was the center of Day 2's final session. Leahy Abu Akleh spoke of her late aunt, Shireen Abu Akleh, and ways that justice can be achieved for Shireen, despite the U.S.'s unwillingness to impose consequences on Israel for the murder of its citizens.
I believe that when there's continuous pressure on the administration, when there's continuous mobilizing to call for justice and accountability, then we have a chance in shifting the narrative and shifting this entire policy and causing the change. And that's honestly what keeps me going, is the optimism of my aunt because she would have done the same. She would have seen the light at the end of the tunnel.
And when Omar Assad was killed, there's always a part of you as a Palestinian that says, this is it. For sure, this is now going to be the wake-up call to the world to see the brutality of this Israeli military machine. We see that this isn't just a question of turning a blind eye. This is funding and fueling and giving more money to this murderous machine.
You know, Omar Assad and Shireen Abu Akleh were killed by two different units, so just holding the unit accountable is not efficient enough. We need to hold the whole system accountable that has continued to cause this. And, you know, the extension of the system is the US government for being complicit within these crimes continuously.
It's important to note that in this electoral cycle, United Democracy Project, which is the super PAC of AIPAC, along with the Democratic Majority for Israel, contributed more than $30 million into these primaries to try to defeat progressives and attempt to try to prevent this block of progressive support for Palestinian rights from growing in Congress. So in many cases, the AIPAC-backed candidates won, but in other cases, we saw races where we have good reason to believe that we're actually going to see an increase in the number of members of Congress next year who are supportive of Palestinian rights. And so this is where I see optimism, and this is where I see opportunity in growing this block of supportive members of Congress, and in you continuing to do the important work that you're doing in making sure that we are advocating constantly with these members of Congress to ensure that they hold Israel accountable.
Palestine Advocacy Days continued throughout the week with over 100 meetings with senators, representatives, and their staffers, lobbying for legislation that protects Palestinian rights, advocating for justice for Shireen Abu Akleh, and challenging the Israel lobby's efforts to keep Israel above the law and above accountability.